Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the MedTech Business Academy. My name is Skender Daerti. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Barbara Strain and Scott Alexander. Today, as we record this, we are talking about personas, marketing personas, sales personas. It is kind of the 101 playbook of how you target your potential customers. And medtech is no different, right? When consumer companies do this, they look at who are buyers of this type of product or this type of product, et cetera. In a B2B world, we kind of have it a little bit more framed out because we already know all the titles that exist. Question is, how do you know the right ones within those categories? And how do you know which of the categories to pursue from a persona standpoint? That can make or break you because we can tell you how countless times people have chased their tail, convinced that this is the person, only to find out and I don't mean person like Mary, I mean like this is the title, only to find out that title is nothing to do or is only a cog in the very large wheel of what you're looking for, and then definitely not your starting point. So, with that, we have an expert on personas, primarily because of his multiple personality disorder. But outside of that, we're hoping to channel one person today, Scott. If you would, you are the expert, so maybe we can get into touch with one of your personalities. Tell us a little bit about personas.
Let me see if I can access Mark the marketer. And
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Um, yeah, personas, they're a good thing. That's all I have. So I think we're good. Is this and yeah. No, joking aside, if we think about the commercial effort of what it is to sell medical technologies, at the end of the day, there's a replicable process. I can't say replicable very well, but you understand what that word is, where there are certain people that are involved in the buying decision, either as champions, as supporters, as detractors, right? Ultimately leading to a decision of yes or no. Those types of people can be extracted into more abstract concepts, which is what a persona is, right? So if we think about it, we've got generally a clinical champion, we've got a financial champion or influencer, an operational person, a technology or IT person. So those are kind of your four key personas for most medical technologies. The key to it is understanding what actually motivates those people and how do you go about getting them to say yes for you rather than no, or worst case scenario, just having them be neutral. And so by doing that, what you have to do is you actually have to understand your technology from their perspective. Why does an operational person, a lot of times nursing falls under operations, but why does a nursing leader or an operations leader care about your widget in the context of what they're doing on a daily basis? It's because they're managing workflow, and your technology needs to be able to speak to how you're going to improve their workflow or improve the ability for them to staff or address some of the bigger issues that they got. If you haven't taken the time to really understand what do they care about and how do you map your value propositions to what their needs are, ultimately your sales and marketing efforts are going to fall flat when you're trying to get them as champions in the buying process for your technology.
Can't hear you, Skender. You're
Yeah,
muted.
you're on mute, which I think the audience is probably happy about.
Yeah, they were probably happy about that, but
But
I do have very important things to say, so I'm going to be saying them here. Scott, here's my thing though, because it just seems so obvious to me that in each one of those buckets that you referenced, I would probably just want to start right at the top, right? And it's obvious: chief financial officer, chief operating officer, chief medical officer. Why do we have to go any further with these personas? That's who I want to talk to.
I mean, I think that's a great question. To give you some context, I worked for a health system that was roughly $8 billion in spend and in sort of revenue. Um, if you've got a $2 million product, the CFO of the health system does not, you're not even a rounding error of a rounding error, right? Like if you're talking about $8 billion in revenue and you've got $2 million in spend, they are not going to pay attention to you.
Mhm.
So what it is it's about finding someone who is passionate enough to care about what you do. And a lot of times it's going to be deeper in an organization where, let's say we have a financial platform like you're talking about, it's not going to be the CFO of the health system. It may be a director, a VP of finance at a particular hospital who's going to help you get there. But you've got to get down to who actually cares in a way that they're going to champion your product adoption throughout the health system.
So we got to break it down in a little bit smaller morsels. I understand. So Barbara, from your perspective, then, um, who like how do you start off identifying who the various personas are in a various specialty, and then how does that translate to operational or financial from there?
So I'm going to talk about it today from two sides, from the provider side and then from a supplier side when we work with different suppliers things. So first of all, from the provider side, internally, not everybody understands the personas of everyone who works in any of their departments, right?
Oh,
Because you're not a specialist in any single one of them, etc. So I was thinking of one of the best examples. So when we were approached by companies who had coils or other ways of doing neural radiology when people need, have strokes or emboli or all that sort of thing, I went right to the chief tech in radiology that was in those rooms, knew everything backwards and forwards, so I could find out how do all the different, specialists do their job in here? What kind of patients are we really looking at? What's that population? And then what are we currently using? And what do you think are some of the gaps that we have? And then I'll explain. I have a supplier who's come and they do this. Do we have a gap in that? So I go to people who do it every single day from a different viewpoint. And then when I get the warm and fuzzies from a lot of that, then I know which proceduralists and things to get together to have this conversation. Once I gather more information from the supplier who's come forward, do a little research, and then we start gathering the personas together that are going to make a difference. Some of it might be biomed because it might affect a piece of equipment that we're going to use or not. Some might say it's other radiology type imaging systems, maybe what we have doesn't meet some criteria, etc. So we're going to start and we're going to build the personas based on, and then we have discussions with them, and we can understand some that are more forthright with helping and what they're doing, and others are going to be not so much. And sometimes they become then the key opinion leader that we can then work with and say, we'll bring others along with us and stuff because I think this and that. So it's a massaging of various things to even know your internal personas in a hospital health system.
We've got to just to build on that, Barbara. One of the things we're working with a client of ours, helping them get into a large healthcare organization. And one of the things we're actually doing is we're helping the healthcare organization understand who are the people inside their organizations that even care about this particular technology. And I think it goes back to, if we're going on the path of building out personas, it's really about understanding the buying journey and who those people are. And then a lot of times if you've got a novel technology, you're helping to educate the buyer about these are the people that you need to be talking to, and how you should engage them and that sort of thing. And that's only possible if you actually understand your technology or your offering in the context of the people who will be interacting with it, so that you're not the main character of the story. Your technology is not the main character of the story. It's the personas, it's the head of biomed, it's Nurse Nancy, whatever the case might be, that actually is going to be benefiting or having the downsides of your technology. That are the personas you need to be thinking about.
And I'll say one thing based on what we both just said is That's what value analysis does. So people who think they don't need value analysis, this is what we do. We learn everything about all the different sort of cogs and wheels and things that make those departments go every single day. And so we know who to reach out to, who to pull in, who to have conversations with. And that's one of the things that got learned during COVID is, oh, you guys can help with all of these bridges and things. So anyway, that's my plug for value analysis.
So let me ask you both a question here. If you've seen one hospital, you've seen them all, right? So the persona that you have
Identical. They're all
goes
identical, and every
identical, right?
hospital applies the same way. Yeah. No, I mean, I think every every health system is different, but the buying processes, if they're not identical, they at least rhyme, right? So, if you, let's say we're selling into health systems, you're going to have some variation on a clinical, a financial, and operational um, decision makers or influencers, potentially an IT one, right? So you're going to have those things. The truth of the matter is, for your product or service, your value propositions for a clinical person really are not going to vary that much, right? If we've got a widget, we're going to improve mortality by X in this population, that sort of thing. So it's about making sure you can translate that to the C portion of the CFO uh, sales process. Same thing on the F, same things on the O, right? Then you got your IT folks. So the value propositions don't necessarily change. Um, it's just a matter of understanding who are these people, and again, having them be the main character in the story. That's sort of the key of doing it. Um, one second thought to think about is um, most organizations are really bad at this. And if you're listening to this, all due respect, all the love of my heart, but you're probably not doing it right. You can get really, really complex in doing this, but where you have, inside the clinical persona, as an example, you can get into specific different sub variations of personas and that sort of thing. Where, let's say you're doing stents, one person may be interested in the best clinical outcomes possible. Another person may be about efficiency. A third may be about, I don't know, fill in the blank, some other sort of key variation. So you can end up with variations in those various personas that we talked about, the CFO IT. But the truth of the matter is, a good first step is just to make sure you're mapping out from a high level, what do the clinical people care about? What do the financial people care about? What do the operational people care about? The IT people? And then what are the assets we have to help those folks at the very least be neutral to the purchase, but ideally be supportive of adopting your technology? Like, that's how I would think about going from nothing, which is again where a lot of folks are, or having like the clinical persona figured out, to actually having the full breadth. Focus on getting broad brushstrokes, and then you can refine over time.
An interesting example is when I hate to keep harping on neurosurgery, and neuroradiology and interventional. But when a lot of those techniques came in, you had neurosurgeons that were doing sort of like open type procedures or other type procedures. We had several neurosurgeons who also became the the neuroradiology camp,
Mm-hmm.
and they would then move their procedures. So then you would have almost one or two departments trying to figure out the dance between the two of them. And sometimes it would start in a department and then would end in another department, or joint pieces of equipment, or different supplies and things, and talk about a multitude of personas and how do you resolve those. So you almost become the grand negotiator in those situations. So you have to also learn where are tests currently done, or procedures, or whatever the care is currently done today. And with onboarding this particular solution, it changes that balance that people weren't expecting. What do you mean I'm not going to have now 40 patients every week that I'm going to, have up in this ICU? It's now going to be converted to an outpatient thing. It throws the whole schedule off. So you have to understand also where your product, solution, equipment, IT, whatever we're talking about, can be used and how people might think about in that persona world if they're like a business administrator or a different type of persona. Ooh, so you mean we could really move this to an outpatient setting? What does that do to all this other infrastructure that you have in place? How much disruption do you want to have? Or is that a good thing in these times?
Mhm.
See, I think the interesting thing that both of you just brought up is I think most people say my persona that I'm pursuing is neuroradiology, and therefore the neuroradiologist and perhaps the neuroradiology tech. But both of you are suggesting that there is a further sub tier or tiers
Mhm.
that are required based on either performance behavior, where they may specialize in, et cetera, et cetera. And how many companies right now, just anecdotally, what percentage of companies do you think go beyond neuroradiology?
I would say maybe somewhere around a 15% or so, maybe.
Okay.
It
Yeah, I think
depends on how wide their offerings are as well, and how well they train and pick people to be trained to understand those things.
Scott.
I'll go with 15. I'm feeling friendly. I'm feeling, I give, sure, 15. I think it's probably lower than that, but 15 sounds great. I think the big takeaway is like most people aren't doing it. Um, and how do you know that you're not doing it right? It's kind of a key question. I think it really comes down to the fact that cool stuff has a momentum to it, right? Like people like to learn about stuff and how do you get better and that sort of thing for the most part. And so if you find that you're pushing a rock up a hill, right, or your sales process is stalling somewhere, or you're not getting interested parties, there's only a couple of things that are causing that. One of the big things that's maybe causing that is some persona value proposition mismatch. So you're maybe telling a good value, you get, I'm thinking in the 2x2 matrix, right? Like your mind, you may have the right value propositions to the wrong people, which again, a lot of folks want to talk to a CEO, CFO, chief medical officer, that sort of thing. That's probably not your right persona, but right value propositions, wrong persona, right? The only alternative would be wrong value propositions, wrong persona. But at the end of the day, like when you do it right, there's a natural pull of your product by your prospects because you're meeting the value, you're meeting the needs of that group, and they are willing to charge the hill to make sure that they're getting what they need to do their jobs better.
Yeah, once we learn from a supplier exactly what it is they're trying to accomplish with their solution, whatever the realm is, whether it's an app or whatever it is, then we can understand more who do we need to pull in? Do we need a little data first to even understand? And does it go across two or three different areas, categories, and where practice is done? Because I always thought something was done in the OR. And when we started putting together two or three hospitals to work with so we could do some things together, I realized that they all did them in totally different places. So then it became more of a conundrum. How do we do that when we have to bring in OR, but we bring in this other group, and then we have to bring in these people? How do we all work well in a sandbox? So it's almost like that's what a supplier needs to do. How do we all work well in the sandbox, and who needs to be in there and not throw sand at each other and stuff? But
Mhm.
sometimes you'll get into places where somebody is sitting in the room or virtually, and they're just ticked off what they're hearing because it means their whole world's just going to blow up. And they just can't fathom and be cooperative enough to really see it. And so you think you're getting there and you're 60% in, and then someone or somebody says the magic words, you do realize that. And then they say what's really going on. We go, we can't do that. And because you didn't have the right people in the room to even know that.
So here's another question I'll pose for both of you. What percentage, just roughly, would you feel, or let me ask you first, have you ever felt like it's happened where a product didn't get uptake because it was targeted to the wrong persona
Oh, for
or
sure.
personas?
Mhm.
Okay, so we both say yes. How often do you feel like that happens?
Um, I'd say a third of the time.
Third.
Yeah, it's
Barbara?
quite a bit. Um,
Over time, right now, I think it's happening actually more
mhm,
than
Oh,
it may have before.
mhm.
Things were very more compartmentalized sometimes in providers and things. So much has happened in the last 5 years that, and there's consolidations happening, mergers and acquisitions, all that sort of thing makes people really think differently. So when you get, a merger of one or two and you get, they're doing something in this location in this manner, and here's all the results they're getting and outcomes and data. Ooh, we need to change our model. Where does that leave all the suppliers, all the infrastructure you built in things? What happens then? So you have to understand when that's going on as well. But I think it's a little more disconnect now than it was before. And people are changing titles. Titles are just going all over the place. And AI has, we haven't even mentioned AI today, but AI is changing so much. So different titles, people are doing things differently. But I think it's happening more today because mergers and acquisitions happen on the supplier side as well. So you think you're getting this company that's meaning when I go in, now I can talk to the same persona about this, this, and this because I didn't have it before. But the new company you just acquired, there's nuances with that that's going to bring in now different people than what your other two products did before.
I think I'm gonna change my answer. I said a third. I'm gonna say like 90%. Uh,
wow.
right. And here's why, because I like to be controversial. No, it's because everything we're talking about here is really primarily on the clinical side. And I think the 90% is most companies, in fact, very few companies actually have thought about the personas outside of the clinical person.
Hmm.
And to me, like, again, I see this every day. That's the biggest error. Like, again, as we kind of think about it, a lot of times it's like you do all this marketing and lead gen and that sort of thing to try and get a clinical champion to raise his or her hand and say, yeah, I'm willing to look at your widget and potentially get it through my health system. And then it's like, good luck, sales rep. And the rep then has to be proficient in talking about talking about finances, talking about operations, workflows, all this kind of stuff. How's it interact with IT? And none of those three personas, financial, operational, and technology, are getting any level of education as to why this widget is a good thing for them or whatever. Like, wouldn't you want the finance director who's going to be seeing this to have seen at least something about your company, something about your product, something about why you're a good value offering or value solution for them prior to having to have Randy, the rep, in the back? Like, yes, you would, but we don't do it. Like, that's just kind of, I've seen very, very few companies actually spend the time on covering all the potential, buying personas in the buying process to actually be able to get efficient sales going through. And the outcome of that, sorry, just to kind of get on I feel like I'm a professor today, but the outcome of that is your sales cycles take longer, your sales reps have to work harder, right? Like, all this stuff, you're just like allowing the sand to sit in the gears because we're not being proactive with these people that are deeply involved in the buying process.
And you need to know who the decision makers really are. I
Right.
mean, it could be someone persona that you've just forgotten, and they're the ones that can say, no. And it could be the security of the onboard IT stuff. That takes a long time. And when I hear that there was technology with IT involved, I said, you need to go start that first. We're
Mhm.
not even going to talk. Because if that is a no-go, it's just not going to happen. But somebody needs to say that to your point. So they need to understand as much. So they need on the supplier side to really say, here's all the infrastructure, foundational things and stuff that really need to happen. And how do you stand in those places? And else do we need to talk to about this?
Mhm.
Um, one one project got all the way to the point of, oh, we didn't know we were going to have to renovate a couple of suites to do this until the last possible thing. So talking to others at other health systems that have done this. So what I turn that around to suppliers is, do you have testimonials about the uptake of this and how long did it really take and where did you start first and how do you actually, do this so it was proficient, but who did you involve in your process that we may be missing?
Scott, I want to come back to something you just referenced here, and I think it's a very key thing because I think part of the challenge is what you're suggesting and what Barbara just said, and what Barbara's repeated here is a global view of customer, right?
Mhm.
And good, bad, or indifferent, local Randy rep usually has that myopic view because the quotas are built around myopics,
Mhm.
right? Quotas are built around moving units today, moving units this quarter, this month, etc. And I don't have time to play this long game
Right.
that you guys are suggesting, right? I won't be here long enough to play
Mhm.
that long game per se. So, how can companies in the persona shift make this move to a more global perspective? When we've got quotas that have been around since the dawn of time, they've barely shifted, right?
Mhm.
Um, Sales leadership is largely people who have had success in the yesteryear, okay?
Mhm.
And they know how to churn and burn a quota. So how do companies get and achieve this global visualization to global personas?
Um, I mean, I think there's a couple things in there that are worth mentioning. Number one, I totally agree. Like Randy the rep is probably very good at his job, and his job is to execute, right? And at the end of the day, he's caring about that $2 million conversion that is going to make or break his year, and that's exactly what you need him thinking about, right? So I'm not saying that we need to change what's happening on the ground from that perspective. The global perspective is every organization, or most organizations, are going to have people that are not involved in the front lines of converting Saint somewhere today and Saint elsewhere somewhere else. Like they have a bigger picture view. It's their job to start to map these things out at more of a strategic perspective. And by that, what I mean, and like, get really specific. What are the things that the finance person that we're talking to care about? And how do we tell our story so that the finance person that is in this buying opportunity will be happy with what we're doing. Like that's the work that needs to happen. And then we got to teach Randy, hey, here's how we're going to handle the finance part of it. Some of those things can be done by the marketing people in like an air cover type of an approach. Others may be education of Randy to say, hey, here are the resources you use to go and educate that finance director on why we're going to do X, Y, or Z. But somebody has to support Randy to raise the likelihood of success. And it's in everybody's best interest to do that. So to me, like that's a key piece that organization, okay, so a lot has changed in the past 10 years, right? If we rewind to 2016, the playbook was Randy is it, right? So he's got to be the expert in all these things. regardless of which territory he's in. The buying processes were local. Everything was, to a great degree, handshakes and relationships. That's how business used to be done. Fast forward to today, that is not how business is done. We look a lot more like other B2B industries than we ever have before. And the way that these industries operate is there's a champion, but there's multiple other people, personas that are involved in the buying process. And we've basically called on Randy to have to get really good at all this stuff without giving him the kind of training that we need to, and it's unfair. So how do you win more? It's you have people that are not in the firefight of winning the deal at St. Somewhere, who can be experts, provide air cover in building that the education and interest in the parts of the personas, and then also can educate Randy and maybe even parachute in as the finance expert for these kinds of things to help raise the likelihood that you're going to win. Like to me, that's how you get to where you need to be.
Here's my
Yep.
opining moment here. And I'm going to jump on my soapbox. I believe, and Scott, you're going to appreciate this a lot. I believe that we are at a inflection point in the medtech industry.
Mm-hmm.
And where that inflection point is an inflection point that most other industries saw a long time ago. And it is who leads the charge.
Mm-hmm.
In consumer and tech, it has been marketing that has done so.
Mm-hmm.
Up to 2005 in pharma, it was sales. And in 2005-ish, it
Mm-hmm.
flipped to marketing leading the charge. Why? Because marketing are the ones that aren't so close, aren't able to just get sucked into the vortex of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to this tree, forest viewpoint, I think we're at an inflection point now where, and I get it, medtech was always point of sale
Yep.
originated, right? I have to convince unequivocally whether they're part of a cog, they're a cog in the wheel, or they are the cog. I have to convince Dr. Jones that he needs to use my product, right? And so point of sale was always so critical. But now that we've gone to a global viewpoint, we are at the point where marketing needs to inflect and take over the leadership role, right? Marketing for the
Mm-hmm.
last 5 years has pretty much been still in the passenger seat. Actually, in the old 1970s cars, they're in the bench seat, that middle seat that we
Yep.
all as children had to ride in, right? Nobody knew it was unsafe until somebody said, "Whoa, wait a second," right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was a bench seat for those that don't know, and in the last 5 years, marketing finally put their hand on the steering wheel,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now this is the time where we do that dangerous, I forgot what it's called, that trick where everybody runs out of the car and everybody reshuffles. Um,
Yeah.
we've got to do one of those things
True.
right now. Marketing needs to get into the driver's seat. It's the only way we're going to get these global perspectives and the global viewpoints. It's got to happen. We're at that inflection point.
Amen.
So yeah. So listening to both of you, it was even after Scott started, my first thought was the whole thing is a team sport. It's not wrapped around a particular individual. Is that when the first sort of tele whatever that we could do with folks, we would have the chief quality officer of a company join a call because we had so many questions and you can't wait for someone to say, I don't know, I'll have to go back and ask and then get an answer to you. So to your point, whoever it is needs to be armed knowing what the questions are beforehand so that they're
Mm,
answering them before someone just says, stop. I need to know X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and they don't know. They have to go figure it out. With these things that we're doing today, just sitting here looking at all of us, we could exchange all these ideas in 20 minutes time and you can make a very effective point. So you need those personas from the companies as well. They have to know internally in their supplier who are their personas that they can call on. A lot of them because they're so siloed. And then they need to bring them onto these calls. but who's first out of the block to get it started so that both sides can get their personas lined up to have a conversation that might mean you get to go to the next set of personas.
Yeah, really
Um,
interesting. I think we're on a path here,
mhm.
and I think it has to happen. The inflection has to happen. There has to be global perspective. The quota system has to change. I think it just has to in some, and I know we're not going to change it revolutionary wise, but there has to be some sort of dynamic that allows people to look at it from a global perspective. Otherwise, we're just going to have a continuous process where people are missing. So with that, let's wrap up. Scott,
Okay.
Barbara, you want to ladies first?
go ahead, Barbara.
Well, what I was really going to say is we're really at a time when healthcare, to get better, needs to know more about the solutions that are out there that meet their needs. It can't just be, I have a little territory and I'm going to go to these people. There are almost 6,000 healthcare entities that are registered with CMS and things. This has been my big soapbox for a number of years. And there's what, thousands, tens of thousands of suppliers with different solutions. So, how can we get the right personas with the right personas to understand needs and to fill those needs so that the patient gets better? And we're not doing sick care, we're doing health care. We need to learn more about what is all out there. So let's co-opt the technology and get the right personas doing the right things in the right places.
Good.
Yeah.
Scott.
My quick synopsis. Hope is not a strategy. I had a boss of mine, a very good boss of mine, mentor, tell me that years ago, and it stuck with me. And I feel like, to your point that you just made, Skender, like we're in a transformative time. The best way to be a winner in this transformation is to lean into understanding who's buying our stuff, how are they buying it, how can I prescribe the buying process, and ultimately make sure that I'm in the driver's seat when it comes to growth of the business. And that's where it comes in to understand who's involved, talk to them about what they care about, translate your value propositions into their language, have the right content, and then provide air cover to our reps in the field in order to be able to make a meaningful change in how organizations can buy our stuff more quickly.
Agreed. I think organizations have to adapt. We have to have more strategy people on the med tech side, whether it does come from marketing or whether it comes from some deviation of sales, but there has to be more of a strategic focus than just a tactical focus. The industry has been tactically focused forever. I only represent marketing because marketing's been the one that were in the shadows and they were only thought was to, hey, manage logistics, make sure my SKUs are right, build the right sets and the right codes so it's all there. And by the way, make me something pretty just in case I have that conversation and somebody says, give me something, right? We have to morph away from that kind of idea to giving the reps and arming Randy the rep with a better strategic vision as to how to make a global win rather than just a transactional win. And I think that's the changes that we have to do here. So, with that, we thank everybody for listening today. We encourage you to like, share, subscribe to our podcast and the MedTech experts as a whole. Otherwise, we hope everybody's getting a lot of value out of these discussions. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate that. And thank you to my panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks, everybody.
you.